Welcome to the All Things Event Planning with April podcast. If this is your first time listening, then thanks for coming. Each week, we'll be spilling all the secrets that other event planners and industry professionals don't want you to know. From negotiating for the perfect venue to knowing when to walk away from a project, we'll give you the expertise so that you can plan any event, regardless of your experience level. Now, let's get into this week's topic with your host, April.
Hey, and thanks again for tuning into this week's episode of All Things Event Planning with me, April. So to recap from last week, we discussed when it's ethical to accept client gifts and when you should try to rethink it. So if you missed last week's episode, make sure you go back and click on the previous episode and then chasse yourself back over to this week's episode so you can learn more about the topic that we're going to discuss. And this is when you actually need to hire an event planner. So a lot of times, especially for people who have a low budget, people who think that hiring an event planner is not really valuable or useful, I'm going to give you some clear signs on when you need to actually hire an event planner and why it would be beneficial for you based on your budget. So if this week's topic interests you, then you should stay tuned because I'm going to be giving you all the lowdown and the down low. Okay, so the first sign that you need an event planner is when you are missing deadlines with vendors and when you're missing deadlines with yourself. Right? So what an event planner does is we allow you to stay organized by being your personal organizer. Sometimes what happens is you're at work, you work a full-time job, or you're just busy doing other stuff. Life happens. And let's say you're planning a wedding. That's the easy example that we can use. Let's say you're planning a wedding and you were supposed to put 5% down on the venue by X date. Well, if you missed that date, then you might not be able to get that date back. And if it's for a wedding and you're trying to plan it 6 months to a year in advance, it could be detrimental to try and find another venue that will allow you to plan your event at that time. So it's very important that you're not missing deadlines. And what an event planner will do is make sure that you're hitting those deadlines when you're supposed to. Make sure you're on track to hit other deadlines because it's very expensive missing a deadline. Okay, so when you realize that you don't have time to make deadlines, that's when you need to call a professional like myself. And we'll make sure that you don't miss any more deadlines because you, especially if you're planning a wedding, you don't have time to keep paying late fees because you've missed a deadline. So the next way to determine that you need to hire an event planner is if you don't have enough time to actually plan out the event. For example, since we're staying on the topic of weddings, there are a lot of DIY brides who are able to take the time off necessary and needed to fully plan out their wedding. But sometimes there are instances where you just don't have enough time or you can't take off of work to go to appointments to talk to the florist or talk to the cake decorator. That's when an event planner would come in. We would act as your agent, go to the places that you can't go and help you make decisions so that you're not being held up just because you can't get off of work. So that's another sign when you need to hire an event planner. The next reason you would need assistance with hiring an event planner is if you don't know how to manage money. So there are a lot of people who get some coinage, okay, but they're not exactly good at managing how to spend it. Sometimes you have gifts from parents or from relatives and you just spend it all in one place. An event planner will help you organize all your budget so that you're not overspending in one area and underspending in another because that's not a good look. We don't want them problems, okay? The last way to determine if you need an event planner is if you don't have good time management skills, which is a little different than the others because there are people who have all these ideas and they can put things together, but they're late all the time or they can't figure out what day it is. You know, they're just not good at keeping time management, but they want to be involved, but they just can't figure out when to do stuff, where to do stuff, stuff why they just can't get it together. So hiring an event planner will help you stay organized and manage your time better. Usually what happens is if you have an issue with time management, we find ways that work within your time so that you're hitting deadlines. Again, if you're late to an appointment with the florist or with the caterer or even with the venue, it can be very expensive trying to reschedule those appointments. And it's also considered very rude and tactful, and people have had their appointments canceled, their actual contracts canceled because of them being so late sometimes. So if you have an issue with time management, then an event planner is definitely the way to go. We can act as your agent in making sure that you get everything you need to get done so that you still have an amazing event, but that you're not out in the weeds, meaning you're not out being spent because you have all this stuff going on in your personal life. So that's it for this week's episode. I hope you enjoyed this week's topic. If you want to learn more information about who I am and what we do, you can visit all the show notes on our website at platinumeventsbyapril.com. Thank you so much for listening, and look out for next week's show. See ya.
You've been listening to the All Things Event Planning Podcast.
All Things Event Planning Podcast.
With your host, April. Loved this week's episode? Subscribe to our podcast on iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher, or Google Play. It's very much appreciated. Thank you.